Welcome to the Burrillville School Committee meeting. Today is November 12th, 2019. It's now 6:31. Burrillville High School Media Center, 425 East Avenue, Harrisville, Rhode Island, 02830. All members present with the exception of Mark Brizard, who is excused this evening. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, recognitions this evening. We have none. Onto the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to accept the school committee minutes of the regular meeting of October 8th, 2019, executive meetings that were held on October 8th, 2019, October 17th, 2019, and to receive and file the minutes of the policy subcommittee meeting minutes on September 16th, 2019, and October 28th, 2019, and to approve the warrant number 4 for the month of October, dated November 12th, in the amount of $2,962,955.14.
Second.
I'm going to motion in a second. Discussion?
Can I make an amendment to this? Or the second policy subcommittee meeting was on threat assessment policy. It wasn't two
No,
meetings.
I thought they were both policy.
They're both policies, but the first one was the home education policy meeting, and then the second one was the threat assessment policy meeting, with two different meetings.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, she identified the two dates,
I
but
see,
she
okay.
didn't specify which.
It is noted in the minutes.
Just note it in the minutes, please, as amended. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, as amended. Motion a second. All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Okay, presentations by the public to the school committee. Tonight we have Julie Mayhew presenting the RICAS results. Julie, take it away.
All right, this is the first time with the new setup, so good evening. Thanks for having me here. Each year we get together around this time just to talk through the results of the spring assessments. So tonight is all about what happened in the spring of 2019. And so just to kind of refresh your memory, way back in 2010, you'll remember that Rhode Island adopted the Common Core state standards. And then from school year 2014-15 through 16-17, we were using the PARCC evaluation to various mixed results. And then in the school year of 2017-18, we actually had the first administration of the RICAS as a measure of students' learning in grades K through 8. And the state adopted the PSAT and the SAT as the measures of learning for the high school students. So this last spring was our second year of that, with RICAS assessment for 3 through 8, and then PSAT and SAT for the state assessments. So in terms of ELA, just speaking about RICAS right now, our performance was actually pretty consistent with the state. Our students in Burrillville gained 5% proficiency overall in ELA, as did the state. They also gained 5% proficiency across the board. For our purposes, right now, our RICAS ELA looks a little closer to where we left off with PARCC in 2017. Our third graders actually showed a bump of about 7%, so that second year of that first year of assessment, if that makes sense. And it is typical to get a bump in scores the second year. It is still a little bit too early to be talking about trends or anything like that. We really need a third year of data before we can start doing that. But it's kind of nice to see that the youngest of our students who are taking the assessment did a little bit better even than the overall average of the district. And we'll talk about the tweaks that we're going to be doing later on in the presentation to see what year 3 brings us. In terms of math, unfortunately, there was essentially no change in our math proficiency. It looks like when you look at the data on the state website, everything is rounded to the nearest whole number. So it looks like we dropped a percentage point, but when you add up all the actual numbers and average the end result, it's still about 17% proficiency overall. So the state actually gained 3% proficiency, so we did not make the same gains overall in math as the state did. They got that 2-year bump while we kind of stayed static in terms of our math performance in 3 through 8. So how do we look compared to the state? In terms of our math proficiency, we are still lagging behind about 11% in terms of students who meet the expectation, and we did not have any significant percentage of students who exceeded in math. In ELA, we were lagging about 5% behind in terms of proficiency, meeting the expectation, and about 3% behind in terms of students who are exceeding the expectation. Compared to Massachusetts, and again, remember that the RICAS is actually the MCAS assessment, which we've borrowed and made our own. Kids this year in Rhode Island scored about 14% lower in ELA and 19% lower in math than Massachusetts did. Even though they made those gains, they're still hovering below Massachusetts. So we've seen an improvement, obviously, from our first year of assessment. But again, we have to kind of look for that third year to see the trend. Rhode Island Department of Education continues to say that they are going to stay the course with RICAS. That's something that we've been missing, as we discussed last year. We haven't really had a consistent assessment. It's changed multiple times over the past several years. So our hope is that we can stay consistent with RICAS, that we will stay the course, and that after we've had it for several years, we'll not only start to see that bump in our own town, but also across the whole state, getting us closer to the performance of Massachusetts, who has been doing this for quite some time. So let's talk about our bright spots. The thing that I'm most excited about personally is that our third grade math performance shot up 9% this year, which was significantly better than the rest of the district's performance anywhere. And what I'm really excited about is that 2/3 of that cohort of students had experienced 2 full years of Eureka Math, which is our new math instructional program in grades K through 5. So that first group of kids who really sort of had Eureka Math right from the outset really showed a big bump in their performance on the RICAS this year. So I'm very encouraged by that and very hopeful that that change in instructional materials is going to make a big difference, and we're going to continue to see that trend in grades 4, 5, and 6, and so on. So I feel like it's going to take us a few years to get there, but we're heading in the right direction. The other pieces that I was really focusing on are that the number of students with a beginning rating, so that lowest score, that cohort of students is not increasing. It's not getting bigger, and it's consistent with the state's percentage. So whereas maybe our proficiency ratings are not as high as the rest of the state, we're not seeing any more students in that bottom category of performers than the state average, which is a good thing. Because then when you look at that, we have a really, really big band of students who are in that partially proficient category. Big numbers in that yellow second tier. And when you look at those, we have a lot of students who are almost there. So the cut scores, 500 is the score that makes you proficient, right? So there's a range of 470 to 500 that puts you in that second tier of yellow. In ELA, 14% of our students in that yellow range were actually within 5 points of being proficient, and 4% of those were within 1 point. One more point would have put them over the edge. In math, we had 9% of our students in that yellow range who were within 5 points, and 3% of those were within 1 point. 3% of our students overall were within a point. So one of the conversations that we're going to continue to have this year is how do we target those kids? Because they were so close. It would be really, hopefully, very easy to give them that little bit of a push that would put them over the edge, and that would significantly impact our proficiency ratings over the next year. So the other big bright spot, of course, is the SAT and PSAT data, which remains relatively strong in comparison to RICAS. So this year, 56% of our Burrillville juniors met or exceeded proficiency in ELA on the SAT, and 37% met or exceeded in math on the SAT. Both of those were about 5% stronger than the performance of the state overall. So, we're not jumping up and down and saying that 50% is awesome, but it's strong, and it's certainly stronger than the rest of the state. We'd love to see it even better than that, but it's a significant difference from the RICAS scores, and it does show that that there's a significant amount of learning going on in the district, and it certainly puts us into a category that looks closer to the communities that surround us. So that performance looks really good. We're definitely doing something right. In terms of growth scores, the state calculates growth scores to help everyone, educators, and especially families, really understand their students' progress over time. So growth scores really look at how students progress compared to other students in the same category. So students who scored a 1 on the RICAS last year would have been compared to the peers who also scored a 1 to calculate how much growth they made. Same thing for students who scored 2s, 3s, and 4s. And so our growth scores actually look quite nice overall. In terms of our math performance, 59% of our students made typical or high growth in math last year, and 66% made typical or high growth in ELA. So that growth percentile, anywhere between 34 to 69% growth is what's considered typical. So we have a significant number of our kids who are definitely learning everything that they are supposed to be learning over the course of a school year, and many who are even excelling and exceeding that, which is also really good and speaks to, again, the amount of learning and our potential for kind of catching up with what's going on in the state. Our SAT growth also looks really good. 74% of our students showed typical or high growth in math, as indicated by the SAT, and 73% showed typical or high growth in ELA. So again, those high school juniors are really showing us that they're doing a lot of learning, and they're showing that in their assessment. So what are we doing going forward? We're continuing our shared leadership work and our instructional rounds in the district. So high-performing districts really utilize instructional rounds as a means of providing teachers with the opportunity to continuously learn from each other, to see what's working for their students, to improve their daily practice. And that's something that we're continuing to leverage and expand out across our district. We're definitely continuing our collaboration with RIDE and with Ed Reports to implement high-quality instructional materials. Last year, we saw the implementation of Eureka Math in K-5. This year, we have the implementation of Open Up in grades 6 through 8, and we're in the process of evaluating instructional materials in ELA for grades 3 through 5. Hopefully for implementation next year. High-quality materials are second only to actual teacher proficiency in terms of having the greatest impact on student success. So that's something that we are really looking to leverage. That has more impact than class size, than home life, than any other factor that plays into student success in school. So it's really on us to make sure that the instructional materials we're putting in front of kids are of the highest quality that we can give them. And certainly we've done that with Eureka and with Open Up, and we're looking to start doing that in ELA as well. In terms of that cyclical review of our curriculum and analysis of released items to inform instruction, that's going to be ongoing. Any changes, we already know that our curricula is aligned to the state standards, but we will be looking to make tweaks to the curriculum, as I mentioned earlier, based on what we see in those RICAS questions. So for example, last year, one of the concerns our third grade teachers had was that they did not get to the unit on fractions ahead of the assessment, which happened in April. So one of the things that we'll be doing is sitting down as a third grade team to look at the RICAS released items, determine how heavily the emphasis was placed on fractions. And if it looked like there was a lot of emphasis there, we can talk about how we might shift the progression of skills so that we teach that critical information ahead of the assessment, and perhaps switch a couple of units around or make sure that we have some additional instruction going on, ahead of the assessment. So that's the kind of thing we'll be looking at as we look toward the next year. And then, as always, we're continuing that constant review and evaluation of the curriculum just to make sure that we're continuing to include all the pieces that we need in order for our students to best learn. I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
One. My concern is that we've heard a lot of comments about how awful our scores were, as far as the RICAS scores. And I went looking for information and really couldn't find it. What did Massachusetts do? How did Massachusetts do in its second year of giving the MCAS?
So they're actually in their 22nd year of giving the MCAS. And their scores this year, I actually have those. If you'll just give me 1 second, I'll find them. I don't want
This
to.
year?
I think she's asking for year 2.
For year 2?
20 years
I
ago.
went looking for year 2.
Oh, Massachusetts year 2. I apologize. I misunderstood the question. I don't know how they did in their second year, but I do know that their performance in their first year was very consistent with our performance in our first year. So I think it would probably be reasonable to predict that their performance in the second year mirrored ours. They've stayed the course for a long time, and they've achieved, and after 22 years now, they are still at averaging in the 50s, 55th percentile, 55% of students about proficient across the state is the average, certainly with highs and lows depending on where you look. But it's taken them a really long time to get there.
And I believe for Rhode Island, in the 22 years that Massachusetts has had the one test, I believe this is our 4th or 5th, had the new standards reference
Our
exam.
fourth or
New
fifth
standards.
different test.
Park.
4th or 5th
yeah,
different test.
kneecap, and then RICAS, so,
4.
yeah.
We, school committee meeting, I had been to one for the state, and they were very, they said you have to keep going, just stay the course.
It's true.
And it was just, it seemed like, from what I can understand as far as the Rhode Island situation goes, and, you know, legislator or Department of Ed, they're looking for that silver bullet. They're looking for that, they want it
Sure.
to, you know, they think we can just get up there, just like Massachusetts is, and that's it. But it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes consistency.
Right.
Not just time, but consistency. And you have to keep plotting. And all of the functions that Massachusetts does, we also, Rhode Island also has to do, and, you know, including Burrillville there too, where if kids don't do well on the first part of testing, they are given some remedial work so that they can retake the test and function better. And I
So,
haven't seen
yeah,
that.
there are a lot of layers, certainly, to it. Massachusetts also did a lot of work on a state curriculum. They also implemented a significant amount of professional development every year. So there are many, many layers to it. And Rhode Island seems to be following along those steps. They're certainly trying to learn, I think, the lessons from our neighbors, but we have a way to go. We definitely have a way to go
If
as
I
a
can,
state.
Julie, one of the issues, two things I'd like to mention. One of the issues is that the data that we get from this, we get it very late in the year. So we're taking the test earlier in the year, and the hope was always that we could get the data back from this before the end of the school year, so we can inform instruction for the following school year. And we didn't get this data until a
End
month
of
ago,
October.
maybe?
Yeah, it was the end of October.
And plans already made and developed and ongoing for this current school year, and we didn't have the data from last year's testing to inform our curriculum revisions and instruction. So that's one issue that, you know, as a state, we need to figure out.
Have you spoken to the Department of Ed about that?
Yeah, this feedback is constant with them. They constantly get the feedback. There's workshops and seminars, and there was an accountability workshop today, which is tied into all of this. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that our third grade math performance, I know Julie mentioned it, but when we're talking about staying the course, 2/3 of those kids experienced 2 full years of Eureka Math, which is the math program that we are using and have unveiled for a couple of years now, and it's in its first year in the middle school now, and it's going to develop year to year to year, and we, you know, that is tied to our, you know, the direction that the whole school department is going from grades 3 through 8. And the kids that performed the best on RICAS were kids who were exposed to that for 2 full years. Next year, they'll have 3 full years. The following year, they'll have 4 full years. So if we stay the course with those kind of programs and keep supporting our kids, keep looking at the data, doing like a gap analysis, Julie mentioned the release items. We look at the release items, and that drives the curriculum changes and the revisions that we make. So if we continue to do that, then these scores should continue and will continue to rise. So we have, I mean, even though overall our scores, you look at them and, you know, nobody could say that we're happy with 50% of our kids being proficient, or, you know, 16% in certain areas. But when you look at some of the bright spots, and we can identify why those spots why those areas have shown such success. That's really where the important work is. So now we can expand that to the other, the other classes, the other grades, and hopefully by staying the course over several years, then we'll see multi-levels of growth in all the grade levels. So grade 3 was really, really exciting for us to see that 9% bump. That's exactly what we were looking for. I know that Julie spent a lot of time with Eureka Math trying to figure out which program was right for us and which curriculum was right for us. That's what we decided on. She went and visited other communities that have had great success with this, like Cumberland, which their test results have been fantastic. They're using Eureka Math, and they rolled that out 4 or 5 years ago. So now they're in the 5th or 6th year of that. We're still in year 2/3. So I think we'll get there, and we're showing good signs of getting there in certain areas, but, as we've all said, we really have to stay the course.
Yeah.
We can't have a reaction and change something because we have pockets of kids that aren't performing well, because that's what's led us here. If you keep changing the targets, the kids are never going to reach it. Keep changing the assessments, and we don't know what the target is.
Anyone else have any questions?
May I ask one now?
Go right ahead, Denny.
Two quick comments and a question.
Sure.
Now, one, on the Rhode Island, Massachusetts, I'm not sure our demographic and their demographic in a much more populous state really match apples to apples. And I'm not sure if there's an adjustment for that, but I'm pretty sure from what I know that they're a little different. The second comment is, I don't know what the 2019 equivalent is I'm thinking of math. In my generation, baseball cards at home did a lot to develop your math skills. It wasn't in school. It's like when you learn batting averages and all this kind of stuff at home playing with baseball cards, it follows you back to school. So I don't know what today's equivalent is, but my brother and I became the best math students in the school over baseball cards. My question is, I don't know how many slices you have in the high school, like college bound, maybe CTE heavy. Is there any way, have you tried slicing it that way? Are we seeing any difference between those that are maybe on a track to go to college or those that are, because I'm almost wanting the CTE to be good
Right, right.
in supporting that group of students. Maybe it's too early to tell.
Yeah, I mean, that's not data that we've drilled down into, but it's an interesting perspective. So we get different demographics. So we get, for example, students with IEPs, or students who are experiencing poverty, or students who are, so we get them broken down by race, by ethnicity, by gender. But it would be interesting to look at students who are in those CTE pathways to see what their performance looks like.
Yeah, there's a risk of getting so granular you can't conclude anything. But I do think if there's just like a couple of key tracks, you can kind of see that look like we're serving these different tracks well, because you kind of want to serve them all.
Sure.
Because there are some bright lights here that we really want to, put some energy in.
Yeah, it's an excellent point.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? I've got a couple for you before you go. The Rhode Island cut scores, do they match what Massachusetts has determined to be the cut score for proficiency, or are they different between states? Do you know?
So I can't answer that with 100% positivity, but I don't believe that in other words, I don't believe there's any difference in the standard between the states, right? So proficiency is proficiency, but I will double check that for you and find out.
Because I was led to believe at one point that their states were, and this is pre-RICAS, MCAS, this is like park stuff, and Smarter Balance, I think, were the two tests at the time, and states were coming up with their own, method to come up with a cut score.
Right.
So how do you really compare yourself? So if that were the case with RICAS and MCAS, we may be looking at that same disparity where, we may be better or worse, depending on
Yeah.
what the answer to that question is,
So I will say that, it was very clear to us that Massachusetts, and this was something that we talked about last year, Massachusetts had set a higher standard than the park. And so we knew going into the RICAS year one that the expectation would be higher than it had been on the park. So, and I think we talked about this a little bit, that students who might have achieved proficiency on a particular kind of question on the park might not have achieved proficiency with the same exact answer on the RICAS. But I believe that our RICAS and MCAS standard is exactly the same.
Good, okay, thank you. And is there any indication moving forward that the use of the scores that we're getting are going to be attributing to individual performances, both in terms of students or in terms of teachers, or are we trying to look at this information in an aggregate sense so that we improve instruction district-wide? You know, so we're not targeting individual students or teachers per se based on
Right.
lower scores, but as a district, should we implement a new set of curriculum, that kind of thing? Is there any sense that they're going to go back toward making it a graduation requirement or something to that effect, or?
There's no conversation about that going on right now. And I think, you know, in years past when we've tried it, it has not gone well. Who knows,
Yeah.
right? Things change all the time, but right now there's no conversation about that. I think that what you're talking about is exactly what we're looking at. You know, how are we doing overall as a district? How are we doing by grade level? And what can we do to kind of, you know, ensure that our children who are proficient continue to be proficient, and those who aren't, we have to find a way to kind of get them to that next level.
They also use the scores for accountability for each school. So at the
Right.
school level, you have an accountability, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5-star accountability system. And this is one component. There's other components to it as well, but this is one component.
Gotcha, okay. Well, very good. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
I have a. May I?
Yes, absolutely.
It concerns me that we're always comparing ourselves. Are we doing what Massachusetts is doing? Why aren't we concerned with what the curriculum is and what the state expects of us, the Burrillville school system? Be concerned with that and not with competing with the other state. You know, I think that what Massachusetts does, Massachusetts does. What Rhode Island does, Rhode Island does. What Barbourville does concerns me.
I would
I
agree
want
with
to
that.
see our students succeed, period.
I'm right there with you.
Sounds very good. Thank you, Julie.
Julie.
Thanks, Julie.
Okay, moving on, public comment. Anyone wishing to make any comments this evening? It's a little bit of a change from what we saw last time. Personnel, appointments, leaves of absence, retirements, and resignations.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to accept the following resignation. Rachel Husa, District Lead Nurse, effective October 28th, 2019.
Second.
Motion, second, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the following leaves of absence. Pam Connors, guidance at the middle school, effective for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year. Kristen Abadi, guidance at the high school, extended leave through March 20th of 2020. And Holly DeTonacourt, grade 5 teacher at Steer Farm, on or before March 30th of 2020 through May 29th of 2020.
Second.
Motion, the second, all in favor?
Aye.
Make a motion to approve the following appointments. Courtney Levake, grade 2 at Steer Farm, effective for the 2020-2021 school year. And Ashley Kranka, yearbook advisor, for $1,800.
Second.
Motion, the second, all in favor? Oh,
Aye.
yes, discussion?
For Courtney Levake, grade 2, Steer Farm, I'm wondering why it's for next year and not this year. Do we know?
Julie, can I say?
There was a second grade position that was vacated by Melissa Massey when she
Okay.
was appointed as reading specialist. And so contractually, we're required to post the position immediately, but because it occurred after October 15th, it's postponed until the start of the following year, so it's not to disrupt classrooms.
So my concern is that senior, whatever, as people who have, who would like to be able to get into this position, or at least apply for this position, have they been able to?
It was posted.
It was posted and done and all that, okay. Very good, thank you.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Make a motion to approve the following athletic appointments as presented.
Second.
Motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Can I just make an observation
Yes.
here? I just don't understand why we're we have Andrew Carlson and Tyler Guttrow being appointed after the football season's already over. This is for this year, correct?
It's for this year. Yeah. There may be new volunteer coaches, I'm not sure.
Are they new, John? They're new? Okay.
Moving on. Old business, fiscal year 20 budget update.
Motion to open?
Okay, motion open.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any comments or information? Okay, I'll accept a motion to receive and file, unless anyone else has questions.
So moved. Receive and file.
Second?
Motion a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, fiscal year 20 rink budget update.
Motion to open.
Second?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any information to disclose again?
Motion to receive and
Ms.
file.
Robin? Second?
Motion a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the next would be the homeschool education second reading.
Mr. Chair, motion to approve the draft of policy P 4891, homeschool education, second reading, dispense with the reading.
Get a motion?
Second?
I just,
Okay, discussion?
I have a question. On 6B, if a homeschool parent fails to respond to the initial request, a second notice will be sent out and then a third if necessary. What is the time frame for each letter that's being sent out? Like, is it once a month we send one out, and if he doesn't respond, then it's the next month? Because if it's monthly, that's 3 months out of the student's year that we haven't gotten any response, and now you're, especially if it's a senior, we've got 180 days, they have to fall into that 180-day equal time for homeschooling. Is that,
Yeah, Dr.
you know what I
Slater,
mean? So
comment on
what is
that?
the,
Sure, so, homeschooling request, once it's approved by the committee, by law, there's certain documentation that they have to provide, which is basically a quarterly update on how
Right.
many days they've missed or gone to school and, what their grades are.
Okay.
But there's really no detail with that, there's no detail required with that by state law. So letter B on the number 6, I believe, is, just stating that we'll send a second and third response if they don't respond. We'll send them a letter saying your quarterly grades are due. And then if they don't respond in, a week, 10 days, whatever it is, we'll send the second, and then we'll send the
that's
third.
about a week or 10 days per, okay.
Well, I think if you also look at A, it says request for documentation of progress will be sent to families at the start of June each year. So you have the summer to get
Sure.
those.
They get an initial letter saying that these are the requirements. And then after the third letter, basically that's saying if they get 3 letters and the 3 reminders and still haven't done that, then at the discretion of the superintendent, they can be brought to the committee and their homeschooling can be revoked.
Yeah,
We
I
don't
just,
hear back from them
just
after
wasn't
3.
how long we waited before we send out every letter, because we don't want the kid to fall so far behind.
It happens over the summer.
It hap-
So that initial
Yes.
happens in
Okay,
June,
okay,
and then
okay.
at the start of the year, we know.
Okay, got it.
Any other questions, comments? I just had one comment. I do like to see the numbers of homeschool students, because once we establish this and a homeschool student just continues, we won't see them we don't need the, names necessarily, but just to get an idea of that moving number, if it's, just so we can see every year who's, how many students are being homeschooled, just as informational purposes, if we could get that, that would be.
Sure, so I can include that in my report in October when we start up with our.
Yeah, just to get the numbers, because a lot of these will be, we will miss them. We won't see them every year, so. All right, so we had a motion and a second on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carries. Okay, moving on, number 8, superintendent's report.
Motion
Doc-
open.
Second?
Motion open, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Dr. Salito?
Okay, thank you. I have just a number of items to discuss tonight. I'll start with the building committee, which met on November 5th. This was our first meeting as a building committee. It was to review the necessity of school construction process and to begin the development of a realistic 5-year capital improvement plan. So one thing I wanted to note to the committee so that it was very clear, the necessity of school construction is one component of our CIP, of our capital improvement plan. So necessity of school construction, which is what the building committee's purview is, to work on that, it refers to what may qualify for reimbursement from RIDE. So there'll be additional projects and purchases on the CIP and that 5-year plan that are not related to school construction reimbursement. So the necessity of school construction, if you think of it this way, is one component. It's the biggest component, but it's one component of the CIP. But there will be items on that 5-year CIP that's not related or reimbursable from RIDE that will also be part of the 5-year plan. Where we are in the process right now, at this point, we received the report back from our visioning day regarding 21st century learning. Bill Robinson has developed a list of priority 1 projects. He's working on refining the cost of those projects. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 25th. At that meeting, we'll further refine the list of projects to focus on our most critical needs. As you're aware, our reimbursement rate is about 53%. We really want to make sure we're taking advantage of all possible reimbursement opportunities, not leaving any reimbursable money on the table. So we'll be asking for approval of our 5-year CIP at the December meeting. That will include our necessity of school construction and other CIP purchases. Then be, if it's approved by this committee in December, it will then be presented to the town council for their approval and a commitment to fund. Once that is completed, that is a requirement prior to our Stage 2 application to the Department of Education, which is due on February 17th. Stage 2 application will have all the projects, the necessity of construction projects on there. They'll be designed by an architect with Toronto Architecture. That's a company we're working with. We'll have some preliminary designs for those that go to RIDE as part of their Stage 2 application. So that's basically the timeline. We'll have a next meeting on the November 25th. Hope to have our necessity of construction projects done and approved by the building committee, then be presented here in the December meeting, presented to the town council in January, and then submitted to the Department of Ed for the Stage 2 application by February 17th. Any questions on the process?
Anyone?
Okay, moving on. Next item on my report, we had our initial meeting with the Barbourville Teacher Association Negotiating Committee on November 6th. Initial meeting was just a discussion about process and goals and to set a meeting schedule for November and December. Next meetings are scheduled for November 20th, December 5th, and December 18th. Confident that we'll negotiate a fair and equitable contract that allows for continued collaboration and support for the BTA. So just really starting that process now. Will be more to report after the next session. Next item, Commissioner of Education issued a decision determining that Barbourville is fiscally responsible for the special education per pupil cost for a student that was placed as a residential schooling environment by DCYF. This was an ongoing legal battle that we've had going back for, I believe it's well over a year. We contested the cost, we contested the cost of the student placement because the student was placed at a residential facility without any input from the Barbourville team. It was a unilateral decision by DCYF claiming it's in the best interest of the student. Our team did not have any input in that decision. This is a student that was previously in our district and was not in a residential program. The reason that we fought this is that there is a significant cost for residential treatment as opposed to either a normal day placement outside of the district or even an in-district service placement. So our contention was that we could provide educational services for the student within our own district. The placement at the residential facility additionally was not due to educational need. So they were placed there really for social and emotional need, and what DCYF claimed was not specifically related to their educational plan, but more for the whole child approach. Our contention was that, we shouldn't be charged for that because it was a DCYF unilateral decision without any input from us, and the commissioner determined that we are indeed financially responsible for the cost of the placement. So again, that was the culmination of a lengthy legal battle. Several districts have fought the same battle on this, and we've all lost. So we were now billed for that for the residential placement for that student.
Is his parental rights been terminated? Do you know?
I don't believe so. On that particular student. You know that, Dave? No,
Do we get any type of reimbursement for that at all? That's a pretty
And
good chunk of money.
in this case, we do not,
We
We
don't?
do not.
other than the normal state aid, though, the special ed state aid.
Where would a remedy for that scenario come from? Obviously, districts fighting it on their own are not winning, right? What governs the DCYF, give them the authority to have that control? Is there something at the state level that we could lobby for, or?
Well, the next step would be if you want to fight after the commission had determined that we're financially responsible. If we refuse to accept that, we would go to Superior Court, but probably would lose that, in all honesty, and we would incur a significant legal bill.
Yeah, I think you misunderstood my question, not for this particular case, but moving forward, it's likely that this will happen again. And they're following
So-
a certain set of rules or
Right.
guidelines that were designed and written by somebody, right? And so at what level?
So our
Will those-
legislative liaison, we have two. We have the school board has Tim Duffy, who's the legislative liaison who advocates on behalf of school committees, and Tim Ryan from the Superintendent's Association is the legislative liaison for superintendents. So I've reached out to Tim specifically about this. We've had conversations, most districts have, to express our displeasure with how DCYF decisions are unilaterally made at times, and with really very little, if any, consideration for the financial impact of a district or on a district.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Would it be possible for us to put together a resolution on something like that and send that out?
I think that because
that.
the concern was it's a residential placement, and the student needed a residential
But the
placement.
fact that our district is picking up the cost,
The total tab,
the
you're right.
total tab, that's why I would
Right.
I
So
would
if our-
suggest a resolution be
If our
sent to.
team met and our team agreed that the best placement for this student was a residential placement, then we would pick up, absolutely, we would be on board with picking up the tab for that 100%, because our team made the decision. In this case, our team was not involved in the decision.
Exactly.
DCYF said, he's going to this school, and you're paying for it, and that's it. And our team disagreed with the decision, but didn't have a voice in making the decision at all.
That's right.
So this has happened in other schools, then, you're saying? This is, we're not the first that this
Correct.
has happened to.
So we'd have to go to legislator to change some things.
That's why a resolution is needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could look into drafting a resolution.
That would be
for that.
great.
Good idea.
That way it goes to the,
And speaking of
It just doesn't
legislation,
seem fair, but.
it's a good segue, it goes into my last topic. There are a number of upcoming legislative changes that will impact public schools significantly. I have asked Attorney Scunzio to present to the school committee in a special workshop session. Once I have some dates for his availability, I'll reach out to the committee to schedule a date. I plan on inviting all school administrators to this as well. So there are a number of, I went to a legal seminar about a month or so ago, a number of laws that were approved and passed last year, some of which don't go into effect till the 2021 school year.
yes,
But we've got to line up everything to make sure we're
In
prepared for
compliance,
those and in
yeah.
compliance once.
Did you say you were inviting our legislators?
I'm going to invite our school administrators, and I can invite our legislators if I think it would be helpful.
yes.
Is that gonna be,
There'll be a special
during the day
workshop,
or at night?
probably at night.
Okay.
So stay tuned as soon as I get some dates for him, probably be sometime in January.
That's good.
That
I don't think it
concludes
will
my
hurt for
report.
them to hear the feedback that, and what's, you know, they're the ones that are gonna be fighting for us, so hopefully they are
Right,
anyway.
right. Hopefully.
Concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any additional questions if you have any.
Anybody else? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, moving on to, we've got administrators' reports.
Mr. Chair, motion to receive and file with a thank you to all the administrators, staff, students, for all the great educational information, especially the arts, the sports, and other projects presented, and all the reports that we received.
Second.
I'm going to motion in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I just would like to give a shout out
Yeah.
to our cross-country team
Yes.
for winning the Class C championship, the girls' cross-country team,
Yes.
so that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
And I would just like to know, Monica, was that you Good job.
Yes, indeed.
Very nice.
I couldn't quite tell, Monica, who was under that, but. Yeah.
We also had one of our cross-country runners, male runner, Mitchell Daly, who shattered pretty much every record at the school level.
Yes.
The most
Oh, really?
decorated
Yes.
cross-country runner in school history, I believe.
That's awesome.
It's amazing, yeah.
Yeah, that is
Right, on to our
fantastic.
football team.
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
the football team plays
I
on
said,
Saturday.
while we're at it, right, we'll just go right down the list, because it's a pretty impressive one. And the cross-country goes to my heart, because I was a runner back in
Oh,
high
really?
school. Yeah, so to see the teams both compete at such a high level this year, it was really refreshing to see. So that
Yeah.
was great, and
Yep.
kudos to the girls volleyball, who are starting,
Playing
tonight
right
at
now.
7:30, I
North
think.
They play
Kingstown.
In
now?
North Kingston, the semifinal.
Oh, that's right.
Is
Yes,
tonight, yes. So, and the football's for semifinal this
Saturday.
weekend, right? So,
Saturday against
Saturday,
Northwest.
yeah, a lot of exciting things going on, so
My sports.
congratulations to all the
All the
student
athletes,
athletes.
yes,
Exactly
indeed.
right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that. Reports of school committee subcommittees. Anybody have anything to report? Hearing none. Oh, yeah,
I
go ahead.
don't know if you've been made aware, but the BEC did open at Austin T. Levy.
Oh, good, yep.
It was a big success. As far as I know, there was very little kinks or, oh, okay. Little ones, little ones.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's good. Excellent. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on. Correspondence and Communications.
Mr. Chair, motion to receive the Exeter West Greenwich Regional School District Resolution. To receive and file.
Get a motion,
Second?
a second. Any discussion?
Just to mention that resolution is very similar to the Portsmouth one that we drafted a letter of support on,
Yes.
Best in Field Trip.
And that was forwarded to the town council, I think, if I remember
It was.
correctly, right? All right, thank you. Oh, we need a vote. Yes, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
New business, approve homeschool applications.
Mr. Chair, make a motion to approve the homeschool applications as presented.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? None, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Overnight field trip request.
Motion to approve as presented.
Second?
Any discussion?
I, once again, will volunteer my services as a chaperone. I try every year, and I try every trip, I should say, but
I did have just one quick question on it, actually. It does say 7 students are attending, number of chaperones 1, total number of adults 1. So is that the teacher that's being the chaperone, or is it,
It's the teacher.
so there's
As far as
just,
I know, it's the teacher, Amanda Lemos.
so it'd be the one teacher and then
7 kids.
then the guide who was also with them at the
Yes.
entire time. So there's 2 adults, okay.
I went on a trip like this in high school, and there's nothing like it.
Super
It
awesome.
made, senior year.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Vacation, I believe.
And I think Iceland's coming up, right? That's, who's counting, right? That's great. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Threat assessment policy, first reading.
Mr. Chair, motion to approve Threat Assessment Policy P6222. First reading, dispense with reading.
Got a motion?
Second?
Motion is a second. Any discussion? I'll just make a comment that we did meet to review this as a policy subcommittee, and it is very thorough. We had a pretty good conversation, and we had a lot of good back and forth, and but it covers a lot of ground, and I was kind of pleasantly surprised at how well it was put together. So kudos to Dr. Alba for helping with all that. Right, thank you so much. And
Ms. Prestara, Mrs. Prestara.
Mrs. Prestara, that's right, I forgot, and she's not here. I would have thanked her if she was here as well. Thank you so much, and we've got a motion and a second.
I just have a quick comment.
Yes, go ahead.
I think ever since this subcommittee was reformed, when we were all reelected or elected, I think it's been great, because I think older policies have been revised, and new policies that we need are being created, so I give you, whoever's included, kudos.
A lot of thanks to the administration. I do intend to try and take some of my time this winter and go through some of the older stuff, which you mentioned, there's a lot of old stuff in there that
There's a
probably
lot of
needs to
old
be
good
revisited.
stuff, but
so-
it's nice that things are being revamped and refreshed a little bit, so,
Yes, so
thank
that's
you.
good stuff. All right, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And the last item here is, this is something actually I had requested we put on the agenda. I think it's something that is being worked on already, but I thought it might be a good idea to, to mention it in public session. Discussion regarding social media promotion. We're working on that already with the CTE programs, and I think, and just as a parent as well, I think it's helpful for me to stay in tune with what's going on with the schools, because a lot of times you get home and you check your email, you check your Facebook, and you have your dinner, and then you go to bed, and then you forget, oh, I missed that, happened last week, So I think a good ongoing way to have communications with the public, with parents, or future parents of kids that want to go to the district, the CTA programs, and promote all that stuff. So I put it on the agenda to have a discussion about that, and if you'd like to have any questions or
I'd like
thoughts,
to make
or,
a comment.
yes.
A lot of that is already in the reports that we receive from the administrators in the schools. And also, a lot of it is on the district website. So, I mean, social media, it's on the website.
Yes, I certainly agree. One of the things that I forget to do is go to the website. So, so it's almost like a way to remind people that the website's there, so so it's not necessarily that you have to send out information all the time with all of it in it, just don't forget there's good things happening. So that was the thought process behind it, and I think.
If I may,
go ahead.
I think some of the rationale behind that, and I had a lengthy meeting with Sean about this, who was, got some significant experience working on this and working in other districts, is to use social media to our advantage as a school district to promote all the good things that are happening here. And right now, we've got some Facebook pages, we've got some Twitter accounts, but they're very fragmented. They're not connected. There's not one person in charge of it. There's not one group in charge of it. And people will get little snippets of messages here or there. Occasionally, you may not, there's a Facebook page that no one may post on it for a month, and then all of a sudden they may put 10 posts on there. So I think the idea was really to flood our social media market through really a Facebook account that is connected to all of our schools in our district and provide constant, ongoing recognition and promotion of all the things that are happening every day in our schools.
Well, what
So-
happens if a person doesn't use Facebook at all, such as I? I do not participate in Facebook.
You can go on the website.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Go to the website,
School
Doc.
reports.
Can we,
I'll call you.
Call me. Do
The
not-
old-fashioned
Do
way.
not use the Facebook, because I am not on Facebook.
So do you have an
Well, the
iPad? Do you have
social
a regular
media is
pad?
such a, it's so big today. It's,
Oh,
can we
you
loop
know,
this
it's
in?
in good and bad ways.
Well, the estimates are right now, but that 70% of the people in our country get the majority of their news from social media sites. 70%.
Yeah.
And if the younger you get, the higher that number goes. And I would say that out of, myself included, one of the first things that most of us do in the morning is check their Facebook page,
Yeah.
just to see what news is out there.
Don't
And
sleep
years
at
ago,
night.
you used to
morning
read
is
the
read the
read the
newspapers.
journal. Now people are reading Facebook. So to take advantage of that and
Exactly.
to keep in
Sure.
mind that high school seniors this year were born in the year 2005. So
Lot of signs.
that's all they know.
I just have a concern about, I think it's a wonderful thing to put those positive things out there, but what if some negative stuff comes in, and it comes in from Lord knows whatever?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it would just, does it, just basically what we've experienced in the recent past, how would we be able to, or how would it go? How could we make this go in a more positive?
So typically, and Sean can jump in, because I know he's had some experience with this, but typically what happens, once you have a kind of a groundswell of support on those pages. There's so many positive things happening in such a positive direction of that page, that when someone, makes a negative comment, those sites kind of police themselves.
They do.
Where, one person may make a negative comment, and then 15 other people who had positive experiences will kind of drown that out.
What Tiverton's done, and I work at Middletown, and we just started doing it a month ago, and within less than 20 days, we already, we have, I don't tweet, but we've got Twitter hooked up to it, is what we've noticed is my superintendent had me chase down someone that reposted something that was literally like a dislike. They were like kind of angry. And it was one person out of 1,000 posts on our initiation of the page. And it was, down the line. So we really couldn't see who it was. It was nothing negative, but it kind of polices itself. There will be a manager like we're doing. What Tiverton has noticed is that, and I having done web design over the years and not being a social media expert, is I always thought my thought process was each school should have their own identity. And what Tiverton did is I really love what they did. They have one district page. They've merged it all together. And think of it this way. I moved to Burrillville 18 years ago. I would have known more of what was going on higher up in high school, middle school, which we do a great job in promoting what we're doing. But I only joined like the Levy School or Steer Farm and wanted to see what was going there. And I had to keep rejoining all the different schools. If I just have one place to go, I'm seeing what the football team's doing. I'm seeing what the band's doing. I'm seeing the great things that the CTE are doing when my kid's in first grade. So we're building that community relationship by doing this. And I think it's a great time for us to do it. I am friends with many teachers before I took this position. And I was lucky enough to be able to see some of the stuff that they post. This allows us as a team effort to be able to say, here's what we're doing, Barbourville. Could be sports, it could be CT, it could be anything. Fundraisers, another thing that we can put out there. But Tiverton this is their 5th year doing it, and they haven't had they've had a couple of problems with naysayers, but it literally healed itself. There's gonna be a need to manage it, but I think as a whole, we're doing it right now, and this again is just a discussion, Mike. So when I say we're doing it in my current school district, we're doing it, all of our principals are doing it. There are other districts that have just one person that has a calendar of here's what's going on at Steer Farm today. The teachers put their stuff up there, and this person comes over, takes pictures, finds out what's going on, and posts about it and promotes it. There's many different ways to do it, but I went to Mike to say this is, I think, a good time for us to discuss this with the administration.
So what I'd like to do is kind of brainstorm some ideas and bring it back to the committee to
I have a question.
get a direction out.
With Facebook and the number of things that I hear, both positive and negative, would we have to develop a policy as to what can be posted, what can be said, what cannot be said, et cetera, et cetera? So we would have to look into.
Yeah, I think we
That's
have a
part of the
social media
process.
policy already, so we'll have to look at that. But when you create a group, only certain people can
Right.
post in that group as an administrative rights. And you'd have rights to shut off comments and block comments and edit,
Exactly.
if there are things like that. So we've got a lot of legwork to do behind it before we
Yeah.
start. But just to give you, a perfect example, I was at Levy last week when Monica was covered in silly string. And, the PTO, they did a wonderful job. They raised well over $20,000. And I don't think the majority of our middle school and high school parents have any idea that happened
No.
at the elementary school that they, maybe their nephew or niece may be going to next year.
Well, a
So-
lot of this, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
A lot of the sports now have their own, like I know the the football team has their own Facebook page. I think just about I could be wrong, but all the sports have their own, I think it's run by
The
a
boosters.
parent or something right
Yeah.
now.
Right.
But for the most part, we're already out there, so.
Is there any way we can, just logistically speaking, lob this in with Martin and Associates so that the messaging through?
You could, but it'd be very pricey. And it's kind of a free service. It's not a Facebook page and do this on your own. It shouldn't cost much.
Right.
They
Right.
would charge us by the hour. And
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like messaging, so everything's aligned and uniform. That's the marketer coming out in me.
I mean, if they use, they've developed some logos for us and things like that we can use.
Okay,
And we can
awesome.
use a lot of the work that they've done for us and incorporate it. But one of the thoughts we had was to have one person district-wide in charge of this,
Right.
whether it's a small stipend position or someone who's involved in the PTOs or
Yep.
PTFs that can kind of take the reins and run with it. So it's really not a lot of work once you have the system in place.
Yeah.
But if we have one person that, if something's happening at Levy and Monica takes 3 pictures of it, she just sends it to this person, doesn't have to do anything else.
I love this
And
idea.
that person writes something
Love
up,
this idea.
post it, and that's it. And if you're posting, and, from all 5 schools, you're posting 2 or 3 posts about each school every day, you're getting 10 or 12 posts that are flooding that market every single day. And
Why don't we put this on pending issues so that we can have further discussions about it as
Sure.
ideas?
I'll come up with some, we'll brainstorm some ideas and come up with some options for us for the next meeting.
All right.
On the pending issues, if that's
Just
okay.
That'd be
a
good.
final thought, maybe once this is fully developed in a few years, we can somehow incorporate our kids into it. So whether they become the administrators of it, it becomes like the social media club, or somehow we can, digital marketing, we can
Great idea.
transform it so that they're involved.
Good idea.
They have to be very, very trusted kids and students.
Still have oversight, I'm
But
sure.
there'd still be, yeah,
Words out.
still be oversight, but if they can come up with like a digital marketing campaign or something,
Yeah.
I think that would be a good opportunity.
I have to say, like, a lot of the things, I'm always on Facebook, and a lot of the things that I see that's going on, I get off of Facebook. Like, when we get the reports from the administration, a lot of the stuff has already happened. You know what I mean? So I didn't realize, they had Taco Tuesday night or something, but it's already gone by, and, things like that. So I see it on Facebook a lot of times, So I think
So
it's a
I'm not sure
wonderful
if we would
idea.
entertain a motion to give Dr. Salito the heads up to go ahead and start with this process. I mean, it
So
sounds like we're.
moved.
Second?
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's great. I think that's a really good
Thank you.
thing. Thank you.
Working on that.
Moving on, committee comments on agenda items. Does anybody have anything else to say about anything else we've talked about this evening? And pending issues, we now have one. And number 15.
Motion to adjourn.
Very good. Thank
Second.
you, everyone. All in favor?
Aye.
There it is.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.